Welcome back, boys and girls. Chapter 6, Rye. The pond-side meeting with the beavers had infuriated and humiliated poor Rye. It wasn't only the beavers that had upset him. It was all that talk about his brother Ragweed. Rye loved his older brother a lot, admired him, looked up to him. But if Ragweed wasn't teasing Rye, he was lecturing him, telling him the best way to do something or say something, or tell him what he was doing wrong. Rye chafed under such treatment, despised it. So there were times Rye was quite sure he hated Ragweed too. It seemed that no matter what he did, his whole family, mother, father, brothers, and sisters, was holding Ragweed up as the best. Rye was sure they were always comparing him to Ragweed. Unfavorably, as far as Rye was concerned, it wasn't fair. "I'm not Ragweed," he continually reminded them. "I'm me." It didn't help that Rye and Ragweed looked so much alike. Though a few months younger than Ragweed, Rye was just as thin and long, and had the same sharp, penetrating gaze and noble nose. The way most knew how to tell the brothers apart was that small notch in Rye's right ear. But whereas Ragweed was blunt, even cocky, Rye was considered the more thoughtful mouse. "Something of a dreamer, a romantic," Clover said with a wistful shake of her head. Rye often wandered nearby meadows where he liked to fling himself under a flower and daydream of romantic adventures. When he returned, flower in paw, and was asked what he'd done, he'd reply, "Oh, nothing. Some thinking, I suppose." "But what were you thinking about?" "Today? Oh, the sky, clouds, and flowers." It was only when Ragweed left home that Rye came into his own. Now he was the eldest of the children at home. Now the younger ones looked up to him. Now his parents called upon him to do things. His opinion was asked. He was heard. Yet, even as that happened, Rye feared things would remain that way only until Ragweed returned. Hadn't Curly Dock said as much when Rye tried to speak to the beavers? Hardly a wonder, then, that as far as Rye was concerned, there were moments he hoped Ragweed would not come home. Of course, he wouldn't say anything like that. The thought made him feel ashamed. It seemed unnatural, almost sinful. So it was that after he shouted insults at the beavers and was splashed away for his efforts, Rye returned to the family's new nest in a deep sulk. To make things worse, no one seemed to understand why he was sulking. "What's the matter with Rye?" one of his youngest brothers asked. Thistle. "Just daydreaming. He's always daydreaming." Later that day, Valerian called upon Rye to join him while he went to forage for food. A reluctant Rye heaved himself up and went along. Father and son went out behind the boulder and took a path that led them to an old patch of sunflowers. The flowers had been planted years ago by humans, or so the mice believed. The sunflowers had grown upon that spot ever since. The great round yellow blossoms, like so many tethered suns, nodded and bobbed. Even better, as far as the mice were concerned, it was a fine place for sunflower seed gathering. Rye and Valerian had gathered a fair pile of seeds when Valerian asked, "What's the problem, Rye? You're acting kind of droopy." "Oh, never mind," Rye mumbled. "You sure?" "Well, yes." Rye, who always assumed no one would listen to him, found it hard to express himself. In that, he wished he were more like Ragweed. Ragweed always told everybody exactly what he was thinking. Valerian sat down, leaned against a stump, put a blade of grass in his teeth, and adjusted his arms behind his head. This business of the beavers, the brook, and all they've done, it's upsetting. It is. Still, the family has done pretty well, considering. Of course, your mother has been grand, always is. You do know what a fine mother you have, don't you, son? Lovely creature, he murmured. Truly lovely. I suppose, Rye said. He sat down next to his father. Truth is, Valerian continued, with a rueful shake of his head, it doesn't seem like there's much we can do. Beavers are big and powerful. They don't want to listen to us. I'm just hoping they stop building. Now, of course, Valerian's voice trailed off. Of course what? Rye asked. Valerian threw the grass blade away and reached over to their seed pile. He looked it over, selected a seed, polished it against his chest, and then took a bite. What? Rye prompted. Oh, Valerian finally said, your mother doesn't say, though it does slip out now and again. I'm fairly sure she thinks that when Ragweed comes home, he'll solve everything. And here's a picture to share. He contemplated the seed in his paws. Rye stiffened. Do you think so? He asked, ready to bolt up and walk off. Nope, his father said. He took another bite of the seed and chewed thoughtfully. You don't? Said Rye, taken by surprise. Why? Instead of answering, Valerian remained quiet and stared off into the distance. Now and again he nibbled at his seed. Well, son, it's a big world out there, full of possibilities, dangers. Your brother isn't shy. He likes getting into things. Seems to me, if he was coming back, well, he'd have already done so by now. There was a tremor in his voice. Shocked, Rye looked around. Do you think something happened to him? He asked. Something in his world shifted. At first, Valerian only nodded. It took a moment for him to speak. Don't know for sure, of course, do I, but there was another pause. Well, I've got this bad feeling. But that would be awful, Rye said, gazing at his father's sad face. Yet, hadn't he almost wished for it? Yup, it'd be pretty sad, all right, his father said. Do you think, Rye said, I should go and look for him? Nope, Valerian said. Ragweed could be anywhere. If he's coming back, he'll come in his own sweet time. Besides, we don't want you disappearing too. Rye hesitated before saying, why? We need you, Rye, Valerian said. We need you a lot. Rye almost burst into tears of gratitude, but then he asked, does that mean that if Ragweed did come back, you wouldn't need me? Son, Valerian said, all I'm saying is I don't think Ragweed is coming back. Rye, however, noticed that his father had not really answered his question. What would Rye's place be if Ragweed returned? Disappointed, he did not want to ask again. His thoughts were already too confused. That night, Rye could not sleep. Wedged in amidst his family in the one-room nest, he kept thinking about his talk with his father. What had happened to Ragweed? Would his brother come back? What would happen if he did? In particular, Rye wondered what would happen to him if Ragweed came home. Would he be ignored again? The more Rye thought about it, the more unappreciated he felt. He forgot how wonderful it had been when his father had talked to him mouse to mouse. Instead, he thought, Pa was telling me not to go off, only because ragweed is gone. It was but a matter of moments before Rye was saying to himself, "Who pays attention to me?" He answered his own question quickly. Nobody. Perhaps he thought it would be a good thing if he went off to look for ragweed. When he found him, he'd tell his brother he was needed at home. Then Rye could go off and have his own adventures. On the other paw, Rye mused, if he could not find ragweed, but he could discover what had happened to him, he could bring that news to his family. Not only could they be at rest with the matter, he could take his permanent place as the eldest child at home. It was the middle of the night. The whole nest was asleep except Rye. He got up quietly. There were no particular belongings he needed or wanted to take. Still, he thought it best to leave something to tell his parents where he was going. They might even think he was doing something brave as well as useful. Finding a pale leaf, he wrote a goodbye note. "Dear Mom and Pa, farewell. I've gone into the great world to search for ragweed. Fear not, I shall return. Your devoted son, Rye." Rye took a deep breath. The night was balmy, sweet with the smell of growing things. The moon appeared calm in a velvet black sky. The grass was soft beneath his toes. The whole world seemed full and ripe. Rye's slim chest swelled with emotion. Oh, to have something important happen to him at last. Oh, to be noticed, to be told by someone, "Rye, how glad I am to see you." Yet, was he? Rye kept wondering, doing the right thing by going? "I'm doing it for the family," he told himself. Has nothing to do with me at all. With that thought firmly embedded in his heart, Rye set off. He was heading due east. And that's the end of chapter 6.